Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the You Can Chat podcast. My name is Louis Oldfield. Um, let me just talk to you first about what the intention of this podcast is. So, essentially, I don't know about you, but my experience of Catholic life as a convert was that yes, there's lots of things for families and older generations and younger generations to do in the church, and it's quite a clear path of what you're supposed to be doing, this, that, and the other, and a lot of examples and quite a beaten path to go down, but and a lot of communities built up around the old generations and the younger generations. But for the 18 to the 35 range, or even beyond into the 40s, there's not so much in the way of community and in the way of lived examples, if I could coin a phrase. Just basically people that you can look at and say, hey, that's a Catholic, and that's how they live. And that makes me feel like I'm not so weird for living this weird Catholic thing that I'm doing. So that's kind of the intention of the UCAN podcast. We'll have specific podcasts and with specific interesting people. I've got a few in the back pocket to that we're gonna have a chat with in the future. But essentially, the main impetus of this podcast is to bring on interesting young Catholics, and just chat with them and show that we are normal young people who are just in love with the Lord. So today, our first guest on this first episode is Raphael Sparanero, who has recently been to Japan, and so we just had a chat about his experience over there, and a few other things came up about the faith and how we live it. But I really hope you enjoy this episode, and again, thank you for listening, and hopefully these episodes will be coming out every month or so. So yeah, God bless. Thanks very much for listening. So I'll start it now.
Sure.
So, welcome everyone to the UCAN podcast. I'm your host, Louis Oldfield, and today I'm interviewing Raphael. I've just forgotten your name from the last episode. Last time we tried to record this. So, what was your last name again,
okay.
bud?
It's Sparanero, Raphael Sparanero.
Raphael Sparanero, and I said I tried to pronounce it as before, and it was like Sparrow Nero or something. No, that's really offensive.
No, you said what my Spanish GCSE teacher said on my GCSE recording. So it's a fond memories, good memories.
Good times, yeah. So we thought today, since full disclosure to our listeners, we have already recorded this podcast in the past, hence we're a bit more irreverent and a little less professional on this one, because I thought I could actually record my audio from my phone, that I'm using to call Raphael on, and it turns out you can't do that. So I started the call with Raph, and my phone decided to stop recording. And Raphael actually had all his recordings sorted out and sent off to me, and I was a dunce and didn't have anything to put to it. So this is us recording episode. Hang on, what's this episode going to be? Yeah, episode 3. For the second time, and hopefully this time second time's a charm. Got a bit of practice in us, and we'll actually maybe it's even better, maybe it's even worse. But if it's worse, it might even be better, because the best podcasts are the worst podcasts, when they're really, really casual and you see people roaring. I'm going to stop talking. The topic of this topic of this episode is someone, I'm not sure who, but I do know who, has been over to Japan recently, haven't they, Raph?
They sure have. Still jet lagged.
Aye. So how was it? What were your impressions over there?
Yeah. Oh, it was such a fantastic trip. I was just met with constant kindness and generosity. Like the hospitality was just so good. I mean, I really felt sort of God's hand over that trip. It was very, very special. I mean, there's so much to say. I mean, we can start sort of unpacking it if you like.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, from the start, I think what we started off with last time was kind of, I asked you about what was your initial inspiration to try and get out there in the first place, wasn't it? And you had a really interesting story about that. So
yes.
Go into that.
Yeah, so the reason, I've always wanted to go to Japan ever since I was a child, just inspired by the culture, language, just, I watched a lot of anime and all these sorts of things. They all contributed to my interest in Japan. But I think the thing that really touched my heart at a young age and sort of created a soft spot and a longing to visit Japan was, so I was brought up in the States in New York, and we moved to England when I was 7. But I was actually in Manhattan when 9/11 happened at school.
Oh. Mm.
When I was what was it? Must have been like 5 or 6,
Mm.
and then so our school was evacuated, and there was a whole thing, and I think kids were generally traumatized because of what had
Mm.
happened in their somewhat immediate surroundings. It's this sort of
Mm.
this atrocity happened, and that Christmas, uh, every young school child under a certain age received a gift, and the
Mm.
gift was this toy, like a doll, and a
Mm.
letter. And when we opened it, there was this doll inside and this letter from Japanese school children saying,
Mm.
"We're very sorry about what you've gone through. Know that our hearts go out to you, and we're thinking of you and praying for you." I've still got the note and the doll today,
Oh
and
man.
the that was like, wow, what a touching thing, and what a very gracious thing to do. Also considering, so then linking it to the trip, we visited Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and just to think that just over 50 years ago, would it be
Mm.
50, 60? Or before 9/11 anyway, would have
Yeah,
been
it's
just
40. Yeah, it's 45, wasn't it? So that would have
45, but
been
50, 60 years
yeah, like
later.
7. Yeah,
Um,
9/11. Yeah, that was 56 years ago.
56 years later to 9/11, that even 50, that's not that long, that
Mm.
there, America bombs Japan without warning, nuclear bombs them without warning, and then 56 years later the school children are able to send out, a doll and a note like that. It was so, like, amazing. I mean, in a very pure and childlike sense, that there was just this
Mm.
this this outpouring of love. So that's always stuck with me, really, that a society did something like that. For my third year at university, I study theology, religion, and ethics at St. Mary's
Mm.
University, Twickenham. And my favorite modules are in church history, and I've got a special
Mm.
interest in the underground church of Japan during the 17th century, during the Edo period, and the persecution and survival of the Christians, and how the faith survived without priests, without the sacraments, and I think that boils down to
Mm.
very good catechesis from the missionaries,
Yes. Yeah.
and continued good catechesis from those Japanese people that were forced to go underground to practice their faith,
Mm.
and keep it going. So very inspired by them. Paul Mickey and companions. So Paul Mickey was a martyr, Japanese martyr,
Right.
and he was crucified
Mm.
with the other Japanese martyrs. And the story goes is that he was preaching whilst being crucified and reassuring everyone of their salvation. And it's just so
Glory to
like
God.
Christ. It's just so like Christ
Mm.
that I find it so inspirational that
Mm.
he was very, very linked to the cross, spiritually and
Yeah.
physically.
Mm.
So he's always been a hero of mine. So those were the main reasons for going to Japan.
Mm.
Um, Sort of
It's an amazing history.
amazing history there. Yeah, those two reasons: the experience as a child, and then the interest as an adult now, sort of came together, and this wonderful experience was born. Where I got to go to all of the places that I wanted to go to as a child, like in
Hmm.
Tokyo and all these sorts of things, and have fun, but also go to very profound religious sites, and so it was a very wholesome trip, very wholesome trip.
But what was church like over the church life like over there?
Yeah, so actually, this is another reason why maybe it was good to do another one, because the day after we did the first podcast,
Mm.
I went to another Catholic church. So I've got updated information, as it were.
Ooh, juicy stuff.
Yeah. So I'll say the first mass we went to was on New Year's Day,
Mm.
at a place called
Oh.
Urakami Cathedral, which was
All right,
destroyed
yeah, yeah.
in the atomic bomb explosion in Nagasaki, and they had to rebuild the facade, and there was it was just complete restoration really. But we went. It was a beautiful mass. I think I was the only foreigner in the mass. I saw one foreigner outside afterwards. I'm not sure if they made the mass, but anyway, it was packed. And I think it was the Bishop of Hiroshima was saying mass there, and it was. I think there was one moment in particular that struck me, and I was very moved. Was the whole mass was in Japanese. I understand a little bit of Japanese, not as much as you. It sounds, but a little bit, and I can if I pick up on some words here and there and some phrases that
Don't worry, guys. We're not
that
going to transition into speaking Japanese halfway through the
yeah,
podcast.
no, I'm
It's
not
fine.
going to start introducing myself and just excusing myself constantly. But
よろしくお願いします。
yeah, よろしくお願いします。すみません、すみません、ご
I'm
めんな
pretty sure
さい。
half the listeners will actually understand that one anyway, because I reckon most people have at least tried very, very rudimentary Japanese at this point.
Exactly, yeah.
But,
But
anyway.
but anyway, yeah. So the mass was in Japanese, and obviously I know the mass visually, so I was following what the priest was doing, the order, and following in English where I could in my prayers. However, there was parts of the mass that were in Latin, and it just caught me off guard really. I mean, it was so the Agnus Dei and the Sanctus. It was so moving that all of a sudden everyone's united by a common language, Latin. The language in a sense, if the language, I suppose, for many is language of the church, really.
It is. Well,
For
that's
many,
traditionally what it was.
traditionally Latin. So it was very moving to be all the way in Japan with everyone singing this like the Sanctus together, and it was just I was so moved by that, and I was with my girlfriend. She's Protestant, but she's very open to Catholicism, and I was very grateful that she came to mass with me, but left quite an impression on her too. And it just
She
goes
came
to
with you.
she came with me to mass, yeah, and I was so great to have her. I was so glad she came, and she was very open to the whole thing, and asking lots of questions, and yeah, it was wonderful, really. And then we went after that mass. We went out because we wanted to see the bishop, and luckily he was still there, and he gave us special permission to take a couple of photos inside the cathedral, which generally you're not allowed to do. But he let us, I guess, because traveled quite far, and then he gave us his blessing. So we got blessed by the bishop there, which was really a beautiful moment. And so that was my first encounter, and I've got to say the reverence was inspirational, especially amongst the young people. They were very very present in the mass. The people sitting in front of us were really really engaged. And I think the 20th birthday is a big thing in Japan as well. So there was a whole special
Right.
thing for these young people who had turned 20 recently, that they got a special blessing from the bishop at the end of mass. So that was interesting to see. But that was our first experience, like in a liturgy, liturgical life in Japan. And then the next one was a week later in where were we, in Shimane, where there's the priests where there's a shortage on priests or something. So what we had was called a Eucharistic service. So all the parts where the priest aren't there, I mean all the parts the priest needs to say are sort of removed, and it's just a very basic paraliturgy, and then the Eucharistic minister gives out
Right.
the
Okay.
pre-consecrated hosts, which I'd never done. I've never gone to anything like that before. And I said, is it okay to still receive the Eucharist, even though and they said yes, it's been consecrated beforehand and put in the tabernacle, and the Eucharistic ministers are allowed to hand that out. So that was a sort of interesting experience. So I'd never,
That's an interesting one.
that was very interesting. I mean, I suppose for
Does
some
that still
people
fulfill
that's
your Sunday obligation then?
allegedly yes. So apparently the bishop gave permission for that to happen because of the shortage. But they wouldn't usually do that, of course. But I mean, I suppose a little bit of controversy surrounding that with some people, but I suppose I sort of understand. I mean, also they said I just was following what they were saying really, because I guess they know better than I do.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
but it's a hard thing to have to deal with because like
yeah.
you always want to be careful around the Eucharist, don't you? You want not careful is not the right word I want to go with, but you want to make sure that
Proper
you're
reverence
showing
and
the as much as you
legitimacy.
possibly can.
Exactly,
Yeah, because
exactly.
I mean,
Um,
we in the West, we have a tradition of when you go past the tabernacle, you always want to kneel or genuflect to the tabernacle. But
mm,
so yeah, and that's showing that in our culture at least, kneeling is the highest form of respect you can pay to anything, as much as I can
exactly,
tell. But
exactly.
sometimes I've noticed some people they end up they don't know why. They don't
Mm,
know why people like kneel in the middle of a church, so they think it's just you're kneeling as you're going into a pew,
mm,
and so when the Eucharist is off to the side, away from isn't behind,
mm.
and the tabernacle isn't behind, and the tabernacle being reflected, being where our Lord is residing, where our Eucharistic Lord is residing. If it's
Mm,
off to the side and people are still kneeling towards the altar, people will
mm,
think they need to kneel to the altar, and then they're showing
mm.
more reverence to the altar than the actual Eucharist. And like at
Yeah,
that point, ooh, we start getting dicey territory there because people don't even know why they're
kneeling,
kneeling.
exactly. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
It's
but
very,
you
very
but
important the focus on the Eucharist, and I agree.
mm,
And
it's focused, but then if the priest isn't there to, I don't know,
it's a
it's a
complicated one, and
touchy one.
I
Yeah.
think what I was like, okay, I'm not really sure if this is legit, and they said this is
Mm.
like they said that there was special dispensation or something.
Of course, yeah.
So I
Well,
thought,
I think it's much more important to be to have access to our Lord in the Eucharist than to just be, really antiseptic and kind of sanitary about sanitary
nah,
the right word? The
I know what
really
you mean,
like
spiritually
clinical about.
sanitary sort of, or spiritual,
Yeah, and
yeah,
like no, that's not
mm,
what he wants. At the end of the day, he he
yeah,
went through hell for us. He died for us. He's been through a lot worse when he
mm,
was here in corporeal form,
yeah,
in the flesh than probably anything that you could do to him in the presence of the Eucharist. So
yeah.
I think he's fine with it, but it's just it's
It's a bit of, it sounds to me like a bit of a grey area, and it's left up to the
it's
sort of
grey.
discretion of the bishop, really. If I suppose you got to trust the bishop. So I thought, all right, I'm just gonna. I mean, I wouldn't usually do that, but I needed to fulfill the Sunday obligation. That was the nearest church I could get to, So, but they were very lovely there, and I've got to say, at the end of Mass, they introduced me to the whole parish, and they did this sort of announcement that I'd come to Japan to visit the site of the martyrs and Paul Mickey and all these things, and they gave a round of applause to that, which was very humbling, and it was sort of like, wow, I never ever would have expected a reaction like that. And then this lady after Mass, she gave me this miraculous medal. That I think she must have worn it for most of her life because it was properly worn out, and she gave it to me, and I was like, wow, that's a very wonderful gift. And then they gave me these little dried fruits that you can get called kaki. I don't know if you've heard of that. Kaki, it's like the dried fruit. Apparently, if you eat it, it sort of warms you up. It warms you up inside. So they gave me a bunch of those, which was very nice. And then I ended up chatting to this guy, I think sort of deacon-y kind of. I'm not quite sure what he was, catechist. I don't think he was a deacon. I think more of some sort of catechist, the one who the extraordinary minister who gave the host. But he ended up chatting to me for about a good hour about the history of the church in the local area, and then the nearby towns, and that the
And
sites
this
of.
is Nagasaki, was it?
So this was actually in a place called Shimane, which is
Shimane.
it's a bit more rural, north of
Oh
Hiroshima.
right,
It's
yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
next
yeah.
to Hiroshima. It's right next to
Oh, okay, but
Hiroshima.
it's still the south. It's still
Mm.
what's the southern island called? There's
There's
the four islands.
there's
There's
Kyushu.
Kyushu.
Yeah, yeah, and I can't remember. There's
Mm.
Kyushu, Hokkaido, and I can't remember the other one. But
There's Kyushu, Hokkaido. Yeah, the north and the south. You've got Kyushu, it's the very south one. You've got Hokkaido, which is the north, where the Ainu, and it's very very
yes,
snowy up there. That's where they have the ice festival. And
mm.
Honshu is the main big old
The main
J-shaped
one.
island in the middle, isn't it? Yeah. And
Yeah,
there's one more that's north of Kyushu, which I can't remember the name of. But
yeah, that's right.
hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
Nagasaki and Hiroshima are on Kyushu, aren't they?
Yeah,
or in
and
Kyushu,
they're in the
however
same,
you
I
spell
think,
it.
and it's all the diocese of Hiroshima. It's a
Ah,
big,
yeah,
big,
because
I
it's a
think,
Catholic capital around there, isn't it? That's
yeah.
where a lot of the Jesuits were, and that's where the Dutch
Hmm.
traders, when he had the period of isolation, they were the only people who were allowed to come in, and they were only allowed to go to Nagasaki,
Exactly.
which ironically is the place where yeah, um,
Where it all the
things.
exactly. And I yeah,
Yeah,
there's whole
it's
debates about why the persecution happened and why it went to the extent that it did. I mean, there's many theories, but the Dutch we actually visited a Dutch what a like a settlement. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but a former Dutch sort of settlement where they had a Dutch seminary, Protestant seminary, and then they're still there. The building's still there. It's not in use, but the building's still there. You can visit, and just it's like a museum sort of complex. So apparently the Dutch were trading with the Japanese. The copper. There was a lot of copper and shark skins, and the shark skins were used in the hilt for swords, for samurai swords. And copper was just extremely dense, and they would just like pack it on the ships. But the biggest trades were copper and sharkskin apparently, which was quite interesting to find out. But that was all in Nagasaki. But it was in rural Shimano that I sort of met this guy and sort of just clicked with the local Catholics there, and they were just telling me all about these stories. Really, apparently though the persecution mainly was in Nagasaki, but it was occurring in places all over Japan. Really, um, I think like I didn't realize that even in Shimane there were places nearby that there were martyrs, like a lot of martyrs, and testing of the faith. But a lot of people got sent to Nagasaki. So like Christians were taken prisoner and sent to Nagasaki for punishment or trials and all sorts of things. So it's very interesting sort of culture around Catholicism in Japan. And Paul Mickey he's known by everyone. I mean, I just said Paul Mickey's my hero, and Paulus Mickey, and I was like, yeah, Paulus Mickey, Paulus Mickey. And he's
Polish
like, oh,
Mickey.
Paulus Mickey, of course we know Paulus Mickey. He's one of our patron saints and stuff. Great.
Oh, lovely.
Um,
So he
so
was Japanese, was he, or?
Japanese, yeah, he
Oh,
was.
cool.
Yeah,
With a name like that, yeah. It was. Wait, is it
crucified.
Paulus?
Paulus,
Paulus?
Paulus Mickey. He was that was what
So
he's known as. But in the West, he's Paul Mickey.
Right. So he's a Japaneseified like a version of Paul.
Yeah,
I take
exactly.
it.
The
And Mickey is
Paulus,
a Japanese name.
Japanese surname exactly.
Hmm.
But
That's
he had
lovely.
Paul as his Christian name. Yeah,
Right.
Paulus.
Yes.
But yeah, very very revered by the people there. And it was a very good experience, very good experience. And it was so funny. The guy I was chatting with after the mass in Shimano was saying to me, like, when my girlfriend arrived, we were gonna have a little day out together. And he kept telling her, he was like, you see in there, you see there in that church, there's Jesus in there. There's Jesus in there. Inside that tabernacle, there's Jesus. And she was like, yes, I know. Raphael just tells me all the time.
Yeah, I know.
It's so funny. But that was a really, but the way that he did it, you could see that how much reverence
Playing
he
with
had.
her.
He was playing with her,
Yes.
but also like half joking, half joking.
Yeah,
but
well,
you've got to.
he's right.
He's right. And then but just that he really believes about Jesus' presence there in the tabernacle, and it's just great to see that. When people, like you say,
Yeah.
like you said before, that in the West we bow, and we especially if it's like adoration, we can bow quite profoundly. And all these things that show reverence towards the Eucharist, I think really they're so good for the heart to both do it and to see it in others and others doing it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm.
Oh, cool. But I remember last time we vaguely touched upon it, but Sick Maximin and Kolbe. I heard you
yes.
went to visit his shrine or something. Let's have a look at that.
Yeah, so we went to this. This is also in Nagasaki. It's called Ora Tenshido. So it's the oldest
Tenshido.
extant Christian church in Japan. So I think it was built in extant. So that's still like alive and I think used for services.
Wow.
In Japan, and I think it was
Hmm.
18. Was it 18 something or other? Middle of the
Okay.
1800s that it was built,
Wow.
and it was built
So it's
to
before Maximilian Kolbe came there, wasn't it?
before Maximilian Kolbe, exactly, about a good, just about I think 100 years, give or take a decade or so, before Maximilian Kolbe would have gone there. But yeah, it's the oldest church in Japan, and it's Catholic. It's not yeah, including the out of you know Protestants, and it's the oldest church. So we went there. It's dedicated to the 26 martyrs, and it's I think its proper name is the church or cathedral, in fact, of Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception. So it's dedicated to Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception. And John Paul II visited there, and Maximilian Kolbe was there. I mean, so this is the interesting thing about Maximilian Kolbe. Actually, he's very, very revered by the Japanese people in general. Not just amongst Christians and Catholics, but amongst just the general population who may or may not have a faith. And as someone of great charity, and because of the magazine that he made. So the interesting thing also is that the magazine that Maximilian Kolbe was doing in Japan is still going on today. So they've continued that same magazine.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and you were
Yeah, yeah.
saying
The Military Immaculata, wasn't it? Or was it Knights of the Immaculata?
I
Something
think
along the
so.
line.
I've got it in Japanese. I took a
Oh
couple. I
wow.
took a couple. I can give you one if you'd
Awesome.
like.
Oh,
Um,
I mean, I'm a big fan of Maxi Boy. So
yeah.
yeah,
So
he's my patron saint as well. So
I'll
very
definitely
much
give
be
it to
interested in
you.
that.
I'll definitely give that to you when I
Thank,
see you at the Kaylee.
thank you, man. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, just so everyone know, just so everyone knows. Hang on, it's probably too late at this point. Yeah, I was about to mention that we've got a Kaylee on the 27th of January, but probably by the time this episode goes up, it'll actually be after that. So don't worry about that. But keep your eyes out for occasional You Can Kaylees where me and maybe Raph every now and again, and a whole bunch of other musicians are playing in Irish barn dance music, and it's just an absolute festival of laughs. Maybe you can make it to one, but that keep an eye out for that. But that's keep your eye out. But yeah, carry on, man.
Fun stuff. No. Yeah. No. So yeah, I'd love to hand that on to you. The whole thing's in
I
Japanese, so
appreciate it.
you can put your Japanese to the test on
Yeah,
that one.
like yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be really.
But yeah, I'll give that to you. That'd be good. And then so yeah, so Maximilian Kolbe, and that was actually quite a surprise because I didn't. It was sort of, you don't expect like a Polish Western sort of priest to take such a. You wouldn't expect him to take such a presence in Japan like that, and the impact that he had was more than one might think he would have. So
Yeah, well, when you devote it to God, people can see it, can't they?
people can
It's
see
someone
it.
like Max. Like, have you ever read much of his readings? He wasn't reading much of his writings and his letters and his essays and stuff. He's absolutely on fire for the Lord whatever you hear. And as someone of just such genuine faith, regardless of your personal beliefs, you're going to be attracted to that. So it's not too surprising, but it's bloody testament to like that someone like that can actually live out the Christian creed in such a way, live out the truth in such a way that they just bring people from all walks of life to respect and see the the strength of personality at least that person had. He was a brilliant man. He really was.
For sure.
And
For sure.
is
Yeah, and I think it's just based on the context of the time that, because of imperialist Japan and all these sorts of things, how he could, make an impact on the people who were, in basically brainwashed into this whole culture. I think it's just like you say, it's amazing how much God works through someone who's on fire for Him. Even in potentially even quite hostile environments, it's just beautiful. Yeah.
apart from church life though. What other things did you get up to in Japan? Like, did you go out in the country at all? Or?
Yeah, so our travels started in Tokyo, and we did some, cultural thing, wearing kimono, making teas and all these sorts of things, tea ceremony, that was very interesting. Apparently the tea ceremony is inspired by the Mass. in Japan. So
Wow.
the guy who started
Really?
the tea ceremonies actually was inspired by the Catholic Mass and the purifying
Wow.
the things used to celebrate the
That
different things.
is.
Yeah, so I thought that was really, really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, you also got I didn't know that about Japanese culture, that like literally a mainstay of Japanese culture is inspired by the church. But you also that's yeah, just goes to show you the truth. But I think no, I'm pretty sure tempura, the Japanese dish apparently. Yeah, that's I think that goes back to because back in the day, when they first evangelized, you were having like various daimyos around the country, mostly in the south. They were actually converting. You had Christian daimyos, you had Catholic, people at the top of their tribes and all. What tribes? Is it tribes? Yeah, it's tribes, sure. And they so they were being very welcoming and accommodating to priests, and so priests, when they're on Fridays or when they're fasting, they would not eat meat, and so they would bread, or they would do tempura, or they would, and then give the priest and they would put bread on it, like batter this food, what they call it tempura now. So it's basically tempura food that you had back in the 16th century or 17th, that's all time. But it was called tempura because you were giving it to the priest for their temperance, because the priest was saying, we can't eat meat because we're on temperance or something like that. They're all speaking Latin at the end of the day, so hence it's tempura. But that's why it's called tempura or tempura.
Whoa.
Because it reaches back to when the priests couldn't eat meat, they would have like vegetables and fish, but no meat in that. So. Although, and then it's a lot more confusing when you have tempura meat, like tempura chicken or tempura.
Yeah, exactly.
We're saying tempura, but hey. There you
go. I didn't know that actually about the tempura. I didn't know that.
Well, you might want to check with the actual Japanese people, but I'm pretty sure that's where it came from. Because, like, when you're learning Japanese words, the ones that derive from English words or non-Japanese native words, if they're not from Chinese, from Mandarin, they're going to be in katakana, aren't they?
Yes, exactly.
And tempura, I think, when I read it, is actually in katakana. And I wonder, why is that? Because the only other one is tobacco, which is also from the West. So
yeah.
It's a bit of a Japanese trivia for you.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You're there and you're like looking at it. It's like chocolate.
Chocolate. Yeah.
Chocolate. And you're like, wow, yeah. It's like you could. It's so interesting. It really is interesting. Very, very unique sort of language. How they've done it with their 3 alphabets. But yeah, man.
It's so fun.
Yeah, fun.
It's a fun language.
Very fun. But yeah, honestly, I think the whole trip was just, it was so good. Like I can't say anything like that negative about that trip at all. It was really, really like just nothing but generosity and kindness from the people that we were around. We stayed with a Protestant pastor. This guy, really, really big, really just such incredible humility. Actually, when I first met him, he was reading a Catholic Bible in Japanese.
What? Really?
Which I thought was very interesting. Yeah, and he was versed in the Book of Tobit, which isn't in a Protestant Bible, which I was quite impressed by, actually.
How do you find that? How did you find that? Did he say anything about it?
I just asked him. I was like, "Oh, is this the Bible?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's a Catholic Bible in Japanese."
Oh, my name's Raph, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the first thing I said to him. Is that a Catholic Bible?
Well, no, because your name's Raphael, and that was the angel that appeared at the end of the Book of Tobit, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is, and that's he knew that story, which was impressive, because not many Protestants they just think of the Book of Tobit as apocryphal or something, but he said it's very good book. So
we did talk about that briefly last time about in Japan. I suppose the Christians there, they don't really have that much of a sectarian divide as we do, because back in the day and during the persecution, there was not the Protestants. There wasn't really much of a Protestant present amongst the native Japanese culture for most of its history. So they haven't got the divisions that we've got over here, at least. And so, it's pretty. You can probably tell from the way that your Catholic friend was talking to you say your girlfriend. What's her name?
Yeah.
Sorry? No, let's not go on there, because let's not bring up names. But he's just like, yeah, he's in there, by the way. Like, yeah, I know, but like, But what do Protestants, when you encounter them, what is their impression on the whole of like Catholics?
Well, I mean, well, the Protestant pastor, we see, they said to me, they asked me if I'd give a testimony about my sort of reversion, as it were, to the faith, back to the faith, and I thought, I've never done a testimony before. I tell friends and people I know well enough how I became how I became a practicing Catholic, and I've never given a testimony to a group of people before, but they asked if I would do it, and I said, "Are you sure?" Because it's very Catholic. It involves rosaries and masses and Catholic priests, because it's a Catholic conversion story, and they said that it didn't matter in the sense that, because they said we believe in the same Trinitarian God.
Right.
We believe in the same Trinitarian God, so we want to learn to serve God and understand God's ways, how and be inspired by God's ways and how He works in other people's lives. So that sort of warmed me up to the idea a bit more. I prayed about it as well, and I felt comfortable doing it. But there's just a big emphasis on however that person genuinely receives God and they're able to live the gospel after having received Him in that way is a good thing. And I think I respected that because there was no hostility. Like when everyone found out I was Catholic, because I was hanging out mostly with people who are Protestant, like my girlfriend's Protestant, her pastor, the pastor's wife, and other people. But it was literally about where do we meet? Like where can we meet? Not the points of division, but the points of where we do get along. And that I thought was just wonderful. Like there was no sort of, and in fact the opposite. They were very inquisitive about it all. There was no sort of, there was nothing. I can't say anything that was like dodgy, or I had no spiritual sense of anything. Definitely nothing malicious. It was all totally, intrigued and just childlike in spirit. Really, I mean, it was just
right.
It was very humble and inspirational. Really, I mean, there was a lot to learn from the pastor's behavior.
Well, that's
very
good.
inspired by him. Yeah.
Well, that's really encouraging, because as Catholics, I think sometimes we do get a bit complacent with the whole our evangelistic efforts. Maybe it's not us as Catholics, but I think in the whole culture, the modern culture in general, we are kind of, we're starting to fall into a bit of religious indifferentism. Thinking that, I mean, it's not even we're not like we were back in the Middle Ages, where saying that there's no salvation outside of the church, which. Yes, that's still true, but it's not. It's true in the sense of you have to be a card-carrying Catholic to go to mass every Sunday. You have to be, doing all the things that you need to do to be a practicing Catholic. It's so much that is outside the church, broadly construed. I mean, I'm not a theologian. I'm not a sort of person who would know what that really means. But it's more a sense of like, if you're following your conscience as hard as much as you can, and you're a person of good faith, then maybe God can do whatever He wants. I mean, if He's the God of the universe, He is the God of being itself. He is essence itself. I mean, He can do whatever He damn pleases. So if He wants to save you, then He's going to do that. But we, as Catholics, we are still called to, knowing that God can still do that. We still have to believe, or are asked to believe, that the Catholic Church is the best way, is the most, I don't want to say efficient, but at least the way that we know for definite of salvation.
Yes.
So, and also we are called to, at the end of Matthew's Gospel, go forth and make disciples of all nations. So we can't fall into a sort of sense of just, we're all going to heaven. You've got your culture, I can't, and you've got your beliefs, and I can't encroach on them. So let's all just sing Kumbaya and never actually try and learn from each other, or try and actually convert each other to the truth. Because there's what is the truth on the end of it? But no. But I think going around with that sort of very, very, as you say, childlike and inquisitive disposition, it's fertile ground for conversion of hearts
Yes.
and minds. I think. I mean, there's a lot of things in Protestant cultures. I don't want to be a sort of person of Protestants. They're not going to listen, but there is a big old anti-Catholic bias in at least Western Protestant circles.
Yeah. No, so
but in Japan, there's not.
It's not
far
as
as I hear.
big. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, in fact, it's like the opposite.
That's what I'm trying to get onto. Like, I mean, do we? I suppose we want to be open to Protestants' point of view as well, don't we? But
well, I think it's also it's the individual, really, isn't it? I mean, in one sense that it's like, you know, each person is on their journey to God, hopefully, and especially if they're a practicing, let's say, Christian, whatever like form it is, as long as they're following the Gospels and, you know, following like that's the journey. And I think it's easy to forget that each person is on their own journey, and God is drawing them to Himself in constantly inviting people to Himself in the ways that He knows they're going to respond to. So, you know, like being my mother was Protestant and she became Catholic, but she, in a sense, God was drawing. She went from not going to church to then going to Protestant church to then, you know, becoming Catholic later on. But she was But she was like drawn, like God was bringing her on this journey.
Yeah.
And I think it's you know, it's also about the individual and their disposition of their heart and how they're living the gospel. It's, you know, it's the behavior, and then how much of a relationship they have with God in their private time is very important too. You know, in prayer.
But people can't do that on their own, though. I don't. No, and so like personally, I mean, I'm an ex-Protestant as well, and well, then I became an atheist between then and now. But it was not so much. I don't think I've ever really hit around the head with it, and I don't think I would have actually converted if I was hit around the head with become Catholic, or else you'll be damned. Damned. You'll be damned if you don't go. No, you'll definitely be damned as well. But it was more like I was kind of God, as in he was speaking to my heart right from the start, but it wasn't me on my own though. It was also the example of faithful Catholics saying stuff like, be a Christian, and if you want to be a Christian, go to the original church. If you're discerning, then just go to the original. Don't you know? If you're wondering which denomination to be part of, the Catholic Church is the original one, so and they're the ones that actually hold the truth. Just become Catholic. So that helped me become a Catholic. So I mean, I really do hear what you're saying, that we don't want to be feeling like it's all our work. We need to convince everyone that, you know, the real presence in the Eucharist, the intercession of the saints, the purgatory, the Immaculate Conception, and stuff like that. We don't, and perpetual virginity, all that stuff. We don't. That's not going to convert hearts and minds. I think what really does convert people is living good and holy Catholic lives, but just being people. I mean, I'm going to be honest. That's kind of half of the or most of the primary motivation for this podcast is just kind of giving people an insider look onto what normal Catholic people actually are like on the inside, not just constantly like going to church all the time and then all they are is what's one-dimensional, just pray, I'm a terrible sinner, blah blah blah, mass, which is good. I love church, I love liturgy, I love everything about the church, but I think the way you convert people is to say, you're a brilliant person, you're an interesting person, you're a lovely person, you're a person full of charity, I can tell that you are a good person. Just like with the secular Japanese people, they were really impressed by St. Maximilian Kolbe. And if you can bring people who are out the other side of the church, they like the person who is a Catholic, and then they just, oh right, so you're Catholic. Maybe there is something to this. Someone like you, who's intelligent as you, as kind as you, as warm-hearted as you, is also a Catholic. Maybe there is something to this. Maybe I should consider that. And that, in my experience, is the most powerful evangelistic tool that we have in our tool belt, and we should be focusing on that more than anything else.
I absolutely agree. Yeah.
But anyways, I think we are coming on to... it's almost an hour worth of recording. So I think we're going to try and wrap it up there, man.
Sure.
So I think what we're going to do is... I'll save that for later on. But thanks very much for everyone for listening today. hopefully we'll record another episode with someone else at a later date. This is very professional, very professional round off. But thanks for everyone for listening. Is anything you'd like to close off with, Raphael, just for our listeners?
Just thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Louis, for the opportunity to share and discuss the trip in Japan and to share insights. It's been very edifying. So thank you. And
you're very welcome, man.
Yeah, and just God bless your podcast work. I think you're doing a great thing here, and God bless everyone who listens.
Thank you. Well, we'll definitely have you on another sometime in the future, because you mentioned your conversion story, and I think, your reversion story. So I think I might actually at some point in the future we might actually try and, depending on the success of this podcast, I'm thinking of having like a mini series of just conversion stories, which would be really edifying, I think, because what is better than to people of what is a really good conversion tool is to have people hear or hear what it's like coming back into the church, and it will definitely alleviate any fears of people who are like considering it, but like they wouldn't know how it's done. Like I certainly didn't. But anyways, that's a story for another time. But thanks for your time, brother. Thanks for your time, brother. I really appreciate you making the effort. It's for the second time in a row. Hopefully, this recording actually works. So thanks everyone for listening, and God bless.
God bless. Thank you.